Air Commodore, it's 50 years ago that a very important mission took place in the Pakistan Air Force. Can you tell us about it? It was 19 Squadron, and you were in that squadron, or you were the squadron leader, I don't remember which.
I was commanding that squadron.
Tell us what happened.
What happened? There was a war, a senseless war, which was perpetrated by defeated minds of Pakistan's national leadership, which was a field marshal, a self-proclaimed field marshal, and also chief of the army, who had very little idea about strategy. Their entire perception of military operations was from barrack to battalion, but there we were. They had launched 8,000 men into the valley of Kashmir without informing the Pakistan Air Force and its chief, naturally, who was a very outstanding chief, Air Marshal Asar Khan, and they were hoping to annex Kashmir, which has been a bone of contention left by Mountbatten and his and the colonial masters. But it was foolhardy to think that you will send 8,000 people who will capture Kashmir and India will not react. This showed the shallowness of their strategic mind or strategic understanding. Nonetheless, India reacted, a war began. They attacked us on the night of 5th and morning of 6th. My squadron had not been involved in the Kashmir operation.
This was squadron. This was 19 Squadron, right?
Number 19.
Tell us about the squadron. Who was in it, apart from yourself?
My number 19 squadron was based at Peshawar. I was commanding the squadron. My deputy was Flight Lieutenant Akbar, a very fine fighter pilot, and I had other very fine officers like Dilawar Hussain, Arshad Sami, and Ghani Akbar, etc. There were about 14, 16 of us in the squadron at the time the war began. So the most important mission to my mind was given to us on the morning of 6th at about 8:30. That was our first mission, and the mission given to us was to go and destroy enemy artillery guns which were pounding our forces near Sialkot, where the India had launched its main offensive attack to capture Sialkot, and then moved on towards Lahore, Gujranwala. Another attack had been carried out against Lahore, and another one against Kasur.
Do you remember taking off that morning or afternoon or whenever it was?
Sorry?
Do you remember taking off for that particular mission?
Of course I remember taking off.
Tell us about it.
Well, we got the mission, but the mission was to strike at artillery guns near a place called Jasar Bridge. It's a very famous bridge on the border of India and Pakistan. When we were we took off at approximately 10 minutes to 9 in the morning, and we carried out our normal aerial tactics by heading in a different direction to where the target was, and then getting down below the enemy radar. And once we were at deck level, then we headed for the initial point from where we set course for the target. But just at that point, I was called by the Air Defense Commander, one of the very finest officers, Air Commodore Masroor Hussain, on the radio, and told that this mission is abandoned. You must head for a place called Atari village, and Indian Army is about to enter Lahore. They are on the fringes. They have entered Pakistan. Now that sent a million-watt jolt and at least in my mind, and my formation of 6 aircraft. But we were taught never to react to any situation with anger. So we took it in a stride, and we started, I calculated to head for this village, although I had no idea where this village was, but I was told to head for the Wagah border, which is the border of Pakistan and India. So once we reached this place near Lahore, what we did was that we flew very close to Lahore, and people thought that some bombs had dropped, or somebody had gone through the sound barrier. That's how the Lahoris reacted to this noise of 6 aircraft going down deck level. We went up to Amritsar, we couldn't find anything. Some other aircraft from Sargodha had been there, but they had also not found any Indian army on the ground. Then I started to weave around, went all the way to Amritsar. This is an Indian city, a big city close to Lahore. And I saw a lot of ek. The whole sky was full of shells blowing.
Was it like Battle of Britain, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It reminded me.
Like a sort of a mayhem in the air.
It came exactly the Battle of Britain, rather the Royal Air Force attacks against Dresden came to my mind, where the ek used to be absolutely intense.
Did you think at that moment that here I am sitting in the situation which the RAF boys were in several years previously? Did you think about that at all?
You'll have to speak louder.
Did you think at all about the fact that you were sitting there in a dogfight like the RAF boys had done several years previously?
No, we were, listen, you know, when you're given a mission, your 100% concentration is on that mission. You don't start imagining things. The only thing is that when I saw the anti-aircraft shells bursting, it reminded me of the World War II aerial, the German ek.
Yes, but Commodore, hang on a second. You're being a little bit modest now. You were you are supposed to have been one of the heroes of that 65 war, and you're being very modest about it. Didn't you shoot down some aircraft or throw a bomb at somebody or something? You must have done something that puts your name in history.
Well, I always say one thing. Nothing worthwhile in life is achieved by a single person in this kind of organization. Nobody. And whatever reputation that has been accorded to me, or the accolades that have been given to me, are in fact deserved by those who flew on my wings. So that whole team created the situation on the ground, a destruction of the enemy. It wasn't singly me. I just led them there. That was my job. That was something that I had been trained for all my life, and I had trained them to make sure that when they shoot at the target, they destroy it, and that's what they were doing. So it was a teamwork. Now you have to give me like a sequence, allow me a sequence so I can tell you what we did. When we arrived at the target, when I arrived near the area, I saw tank tracks, and I followed the tracks, and then I saw tanks climbing up near the BRB canal, which is the last defense of Pakistan, Lahore rather. They had already entered into Pakistan. And I thought those tanks that I saw were Pakistan Army tanks. So my first transmission to my pilots was that, all right boys, thank God the Pakistan Army is out, I can see the tanks now coming, but let's give them a salute. So I went over, I put my aircraft on its back and flew over this tank, very low, maybe about 30, 40 feet over him, and I saw a roundel which almost hit me in the face. That was an Indian saffron roundel of an Indian tank. And what I said after that... So you had mistaken
the tanks for being Pakistani, but they were actually Indian?
Yeah, they were Indians, and the expletives that I used are not fit for the television, but I told my...
No, but everything is fit for television these days. What happened? You blew them to smithereens, or
Well,
tell me
I said,
exactly what you did?
I said, these bastards are Indians. Let's get them. Don't let anyone get away. And I pulled up and I started the pattern. I fired my first 2 rockets, and my wingman, because when you fire rockets, you don't wait to see them, otherwise you'll also go into the ground. So when you fire rockets, you immediately pull up very steeply. And we were firing these 5-inch rockets, which were not something we had been firing or used to. So I had worked out a different kind of a profile. So for that, we had to pull up very swift and very steeply up to avoid shrapnels from the target. And I did that, but my number 2 called and he said, direct hit, and the tank is airborne. So I mean, I can figure out immediately what he meant by tank airborne. What had happened was that these tanks were full of ammunition and full of fuel and oil. They had not fired yet. They were still coming towards Lahore to do that. So they were full of ammunition and oil and fuel. So when the rockets got them, it blew up, and it blew up into the air. So we were there for 17 minutes, which is a record in any air history. You'll find that no formation stays more than 1 or 2 attacks on a ground attack. But the history, even the Indian historians, especially 3 generals have said that this formation stayed for 16 to 17 minutes over the target and devastated the entire frontal attack, which was led by a Indian Lieutenant Colonel or Colonel Desmond Hyde. He was a British who had settled in India and was leading the frontal attack with his tanks.
So, okay, so now tell me a little bit about when the result of all this, how it affected your career in the Air Force in afterwards. I mean, you received the Sitar.
You don't want. Yeah, but that was done for the next attack that we did in Pathankot.
So how many attacks did you do?
On this target, we did about 6 attacks each, 5 to 6 attacks each. But later in the day, at 12 o'clock, we got a mission which is the dream of any commander in life, was to strike the Indian Air Force at their base of Pathankot. And that is the famous strike which we carried out. That was the 3rd mission of our day. And we went there. I took 8 aircraft.
But there must be a reason why you personally are named in connection with all these strikes. You must have done something which
because
nobody
I
else
was
did.
probably the only one amongst my junior commanders who led every single strike into the enemy territory. I mean, against airfields, radar, I led all of them personally. And they were all successful. Indians in their historians, which are books are lying here, you can read them, you can check the Indian generals saying, Indian air marshals saying that the attacks on Lahore, Wagah, this place, Pathankot, was a devastating, it completely demolished. We destroyed, we thought 11 aircraft at that time. 50 years ago, we had claimed 11, and only Pakistani people like the son of the Field Marshal, Ayub, his son, he's a guy.
That's Ayub Khan, the ex-president.
Pardon?
Is that Ayub Khan you're talking about?
His son.
His son, okay.
His son, who even attempted writing a book, but he writes lies. He doesn't tell the truth ever. So except for him, the whole world has said that this was one of the most devastating classical strikes, in which the Indians have now, in like 2010, 12, and 15, have now confirmed that 13 aircraft were destroyed in that first attack.
So tell me, what about this? Recently you wrote a letter to the editor in the Dawn, or the Tribune, and you mentioned that historians, international historians have mentioned you or have been writing something about you. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, if you read
what is your relationship to,
if you see,
international historians?
Yeah, I mean, they're people who actually have, you see, international historian, one is John Fricker. He's a famous, very famous air war historian. He was the editor of this flight and aeroplane magazine, one of the best aviation magazines in the world. So he also is a historian.
Did he write something about you?
Yeah, he's written with my name and so on. It's the book is called Battle for Pakistan. And
Okay, now one more thing before I forget this. Can we go back a little bit to the guys who were with you on this mission? Now, you went on this mission, which has its 50th anniversary today. Are all those guys alive still, or are there any who are not with us any longer?
No. My number 2 is alive. He was a young lieutenant of flying officer.
Mm-hmm.
He became an air marshal. Mm-hmm. His name is Arshad. And the one on my left was Dilawar Hussain. Mm-hmm. He also became an air marshal. Mm-hmm. He is alive. And the 4th was a very fine fighter pilot, like the other 2. Khalid Latif, he is alive. Mm-hmm. And then on the 2nd formation was led by my deputy, which was Flight Lieutenant Akbar. He passed away a few years ago. He became an Air Commodore. And then on his left was Mazhar Abbas, he's alive. And then there was Flight Lieutenant Ghani Akbar, he is alive. And above us, giving us cover, air cover, 2 aircraft with missiles, air-to-air missiles. One was MG Tawab. He was a wing commander, but he was serving under me. He was formerly my boss, but serving under me during the war. He is no more. He died. He became the chief of the Bangladesh Air Force after Bangladesh creation. And the other was Arshad Sami.
Who was the ex-ambassador?
Yes, same. Who became ambassador, whose son is a famous singer, Adnan Sami, his father. So this is what constituted the Pathankot attack, and most of them were in the first attack also. And so that was the beginning. That was the first day of '65 war.
So now, 50 years down the road, we have a new Pakistan. And my question to you is, how is Pakistan today?
How's Pakistan?
How is Pakistan today?
Pakistan
was
today
it worth it to fight that war?
Pakistan today is, if in context of the war of '65, if there had been wisdom and they had been leader. Remember that Ayub Khan was a dictator, that he carried out a coup by holding a gun at the former president, who was an elected president, Iskandar Mirza. So he carried out, his act was a criminal act, but nobody has ever had the courage, even today, to declare him a usurper. But he is the first original usurper, and the world must know that. And he was basically not a man of courage. He had been sacked as a lieutenant colonel in the Battle of Kohima in Burma. It was the most important battle as the Japanese were taking over Burma, and he refused to lead his troops. So he was sacked from his battalion command and put in a ranker's tent for a few days and then sent back to the frontier province. So he was not a professionally competent person, nor was he had courage, but he had personality. He had he had a very impressive personality, and that's what did. But professionally, all his commanders, the British commanders and his colleagues, they all did not consider him much more than that. But you see, the war started, and we went back many, many years. There's much more to this whole story. The Chinese wanted to help us. We would have done much better if we made this mistake. Ayub Khan made the mistake of starting the war without understanding its consequences, without being prepared for the war. But still, the men fought with steel nerve. I mean, the Army, Air Force, and even the Navy, they fought with such courage, with such indomitable strength of character and of professionalism. That's what saved Pakistan.
Now, I'm going to mention some names, and I want just your reaction to these names, And if you can just make your reactions very short. Okay, first one is Yahya Khan.
Yahya Khan was a good soldier, a good fighting soldier, but he was into heavy drinking, and also his other moral turpitudes were well known. But he was not a corrupt man. He was not financially corrupt at all, and he gave the nation its first and only clean elections, and he did try to hold on to East Pakistan. I was a witness to it because I was in East Pakistan that time, but it was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto who came in his way and did not allow him to do that.
Pervez Musharraf.
Pervez Musharraf was a typical general. He was okay, he was a good, intelligent man to a certain extent, I would say, and he did very well for the first 3 years. He had a clear vision for 3 years, and then he had no vision. Because the moment he got into this, and this is the Western, what you call Machiavellian interference in Pakistan. They kept saying democracy, democracy, you must have democracy. So the moment he was compelled to, forced to, threatened by the West to bring in democracy, he chose the most corrupt politicians as his mates. And although he did a very good job in the first 2.5 years, he changed a lot of things. We can see them even today. But the moment the politicians came and the facade of democracy, which is actually oligarchy, came, that is when the downfall of Musharraf and Pakistan both started together.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
He was a very brilliant man. He had tremendous qualities, but he suffered a syndrome which is what they call the devil's syndrome. In his mind, if you just stop this for a minute.
No, better to talk about it.
Okay, it's called, I'm forgetting the word.
But never mind the syndrome.
It's a particular thing which the connotation is a man who has devil in his head. Okay. So all his brilliance became capitulated rather to his arrogance and to his complex, something that was buried inside his mind. So he did not use his brilliance for positivity, but he used it for negativity.
Okay. What about Ziaul Haq?
Ziaul Haq?
Yeah.
Ziaul Haq was a very ordinary soldier. It's just that his good luck and Pakistan's bad luck, that his hypocritic humility got Zulfikar Ali Bhutto to choose his own hangman, and he destroyed almost everything that is wonderful about our faith, Islam. Islam is a religion of peace. He created sectarianism in this country. He created all kinds of schisms in this country, and he did a lot of damage to the basic moral fabric of this country. He brought in corruption into the army. He encouraged it because that is how he controlled people, by letting them carry out corruption, then have files on them, and then tell them that now I have a file on you. So these people had to capitulate to his authority. Okay.
Benazir Bhutto.
Benazir Bhutto is a bit of a what you call fairy tale as far as I'm concerned. She was an educated girl, she was an intelligent girl, but she had no idea about administration. She capitalized on her father's what you call reputation, which was also a reputation which has been built on the wrong premise. Bhutto did too much damage. He was responsible largely for the breakup of the country. He was responsible for changing the constitution soon after it had been implemented. So she capitalized on it. She had the capability to do good, but then she became financially thoroughly corrupt. And then when she married Zardari, then this couple, I think, became one of the most corrupt politicians in the history until that point. because he made money on these submarines. You know, he made money nobody talks about. It was a Swedish submarine that was actually selected by the Navy. For 3 prime ministers they gave presentation. It was a Swedish submarine that was selected. But she called the naval chief and told him that no, we must buy the French. So, you know, she was, I would say that she had a kitchen cabinet, and I knew most of those guys who were in the kitchen cabinet. They were all basically rogues, loafers, you know, party guys, drinking guys, and they had no background, they had nothing political about them. She also didn't understand politics, but the thing is that she capitalized on the emotion of the death of her father, because in this country you can raise a tremendous amount of frenzy by just you know, capitalizing on somebody's death, and they call them martyrs. They're not martyrs. Martyrdom is one thing that only God Almighty decides, not people.
Now, finally, a few of the chiefs of air staff. What about Asghar Khan?
What about the present politicians?
But first, Asghar Khan.
Asghar Khan.
Asghar Khan, yeah.
Asghar Khan is probably, after Mr. Jinnah, the father of the nation, is the only man.
Air Chief Marshal. He was Air Chief Marshal?
No, he was Air Marshal. At that time there was no, the rank Air Chief Marshal did not exist.
Briefly now, very briefly.
He's, as I said, that he's a man with sterling character, a tremendous, I would say, indomitable courage, and a man of absolute truth. He has never written or spoken a word which can be challenged, which does not have veracity. The man after Mr. Jinnah, I think he is the only man of that stature who unfortunately this nation did not allow to rise to be the head of this nation, and this nation would have been something quite different had Asghar Khan ever made it to the top.
Noor Khan.
Great, courageous commander. He had a different way of running things from Asghar Khan, but he had a lot of personal physical courage, imagination. He shot from the hip, and he created the best hockey team, the best squash team, and led the war of 65. But the war of 65, remember, was fought by Pakistan Air Force, created by Air Marshal Asghar Khan, Noor Khan, Air Marshal Noor Khan. We were lucky to have him lead us, but he inherited an Air Force which was ready to go to war, so he was there at the right time. And unfortunately, if Asghar Khan had been allowed to stay, which Ayub Khan should have done, if he had any love for Pakistan, he should have allowed Asghar Khan to continue, because he knew that the war was coming. If he had, then Indian Air Force would have been destroyed. In the first attack, 1/3 of the Indian Air Force would have been destroyed. But it wasn't, because he wasn't there, and his plans could not be implemented as they had been intended. They were not.
Abbas Khattak.
Abbas Khattak is my student, so I would say he's right from the beginning.
He's your student?
Yes.
But he was a CAS.
Yeah, but he became, five of my students became air marshals.
So it's thanks to you that he became chief?
Well, you ask him, he will say yes. He will say that I...
Tell us
but the
about
thing is that if from my squadron, 5 made air marshals, 2 made air chief marshals, from my command units. I also commanded 33 wing. So there are 2 air chief marshals, there are about 5 or 6 air marshals, and about 6 or 7 air vice marshals. Now, the thing is that I retired as an air commodore not because I wasn't good enough, it's because there was a problem. The chief of the Air Force had a personal problem with me. And
tell us about that personal problem.
Pardon?
Tell us about that personal problem.
Very simple. He just didn't like my personality. He just didn't like my personality. He didn't like my career success. I had had a 24 year of exceptional reports. You should look at my logbook. I like to challenge anybody to show me another logbook that shows exceptional from 1957, I think, 57 till I retired. I always got exceptional, which is A9 reports all my life. And then suddenly, when this particular commander-in-chief came, his number 2, his 3, all they wanted to do was to get me court-martialed and throw me out of the Air Force. Then they declared that. They said it to my present commander at that time, Air Chief Marshal Zulfikar, who became Air Chief Marshal after him. He told me himself, Zulfikar told me that they want to get you into serious trouble. They don't like you, they want you out. I said, why? He says, there's no reason, they just don't like you. So, I mean, that's the kind of, but they destroyed the Air Force.
Okay, so finally, last question. You led this mission, 19 Squadron, into India. You caused a lot of havoc there. Now be careful of the microphone. Okay, you caused a lot of havoc there, and you've had this illustrious career as a fighter pilot and a commander in the Pakistan Air Force. How does it feel to be a war hero?
Listen, let me correct you
that's
here.
That's how you're described, and in your book, one gets that impression as well, that you're a war hero. So the question is, how does it feel? Do you get up in the morning and when you're shaving, you look in the mirror and say, I'm a war hero, or I'm an ex-war hero? How does it feel?
Okay, let me answer that. First of all, you've got it wrong. When I left the Air Force was because I stood up to a dictator, Ziaul Haq, in a meeting, in a very top secret meeting where he was to announce that he had decided to postpone elections indefinitely. I was the only person who stood up and said, sir, I gave you a dissenting note on that. I gave him a riposte, a very strong one. I said that this nation is not, the heart of this nation is not beating for Pakistan, but from the fear of the whip, that people are getting whipped. And the Islam that he had brought in, the kind of Islam, the Wahhabi Islam that he had brought in, it had divided the society into completely fragmented it. So I stood up and told him that I did not agree with his decision to postpone election, and that the intelligence agencies were not informing him about the state of the nation, and that the nation was in a terrible state, was being treated like animals, and that I did not support those. So it was because of that that I left the Air Force, and I'm very proud of having done that. Now, if there's any sense of, I wouldn't call it heroism, but pride in me, is because I stood up to a dictator myself. But as far as you're alluding to the book concerned, nowhere have I used the word I did this or I did that. Wherever I have said we have done that. So I was leading a team, and I was, by the grace of God, successful because I had trained this team in 65 and 71. I had trained them to fight a war every single day of their life, and they were war ready like nobody. I mean, their war readiness was unmatched. That is how they performed, and that is why I get the thing. It's the Indians that are giving us the accolades today. The most recent book is only about a few months old, and they mention me by name, but they also understand that it was the squadron, number 19 Squadron, that performed beyond the call of duty.
50 years ago, right now. It was 50 years ago. Commodore, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I wish you a continued successful and happy retirement.
Health. That's what I want you to pray for.
Health and wealth.
Yeah, I mean, retirement was a long time ago. Now one is retarded at this age.
Retarded?
Of course, we are retarded.